Welcome back to Who Says Women Can Be Engineers, Ep.5, where I am interviewing special guest Kat. Okay, so hello, welcome back to the podcast, and we're with our fifth guest. So, can you please introduce yourself and your current role?
Hi, I'm Kat Piran. I'm currently working at Woodside in the Houston office as the production analysis and improvement engineer for Shenzi.
Okay, cool. So, can you explain a little bit about your engineering discipline and your inspiration to pursue it?
Sure. I studied petroleum engineering at school. When I started work, I was in reservoir engineering, which is sort of one of the facets of petroleum engineering. Um, that's sort of looking at longer term forecasting. It's trying to see how much resource is actually in the reservoir, so in the ground itself. What's the most optimum way to produce it, and looking at forecasting forward. So, what does that production look like over a period of time? Um, I also do at the moment, I'm more looking at analysis and improvement. So that's sort of day to day optimization, working quite closely with the Shenzi operations team on a few different projects, looking at new technologies, AI, how they can help us create efficiencies, reduce waste, or save time and money, essentially, and increase production, as always.
Yeah, that's really cool. Was there any inspiration in pursuing petroleum engineering, or was there like any main factors that led you to do that?
Uh, Interestingly, I when I was in school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. My family doesn't have any engineers in it, more finance sort of background, business. I was always quite strong in maths and science, and I sort of got pointed in the direction of engineering. And as part of it, I applied for what's called the co op scholarship at my university, which was University of New South Wales. And through that, they essentially pair you with a company, and then you complete your degree while being you get a lump sum payment, but you also get an internship each summer with that company. So when you apply for the scholarship, you have to put down like a top three or four preferences. And I was like, my strongest subject was chemistry. So I was like, okay, well, chemical engineering, industrial chemistry, and I needed a third preference. And I was like, petroleum engineering. Like, didn't really know much about it. I was like, especially in Sydney, it's not like Perth, WA, where
Yeah,
the oil
yeah,
and gas industry is big and it's a part of everyday life. In Sydney, it's you don't really find many people that
yeah. I
work
can imagine.
directly in oil and gas or for operators in particular. So I really didn't know or understand much about it, but I put it in as a preference because I was like, I don't think I want to do mechanical. I don't want to do civil, so I'll throw that in.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting interviews. I got it for industrial chemistry and petroleum engineering, missed out on chemical engineering, but um, and I got offered industrial chemistry and petroleum engineering, and it wasn't until I sort of started researching a bit more about petroleum engineering and specifically Woodside that I decided to end up going for the petroleum engineering degree, and therefore was also partnered with Woodside. I think what attracted me to it was, I think, the global nature of the business.
Yeah.
It's across the world. It's incorporated in everything we do. It's essential to our
Mm.
everyday lives. And even now in this energy transition period, it's still incredibly important for everyone. So I think that was all part of it. It was also kind of cool to be able to go over to Perth and do
Yeah.
internships for the summer. So that was good too. And then throughout my degree, being able to get that real life work experience was a huge benefit for me because
Yeah.
it's hard to understand what people do
Yeah,
at
it's
a
hard to like
desk job.
know. Yeah, especially like when you're younger, like knowing what you'd actually do with that job. So I feel like having that insight would be helpful to kind of seeing what your future could look like, I guess. And
For
yeah,
sure.
kind of going off that, how has your career progressed since you've left school? Like what have you kind of done since then?
So I've had quite a different career, I would say. I don't think many people sort of would have followed the path that I took. So, as I mentioned, I went into originally reservoir engineering, and pretty early on, I sort of realized I'm more um, gravitated towards working with operations and frontline. I liked doing quite dynamic things, being able to make changes and see the impacts, small tweaks, working very closely with a broad multidiscipline team was what I was actually quite passionate about. So, from the more long term reservoir engineering forecasting, I went into what's called the production engineering role. So, that is where you're working with offshore on a day to day basis and you're essentially optimizing the wells and production. When I did that, I was working on a facility called New Yin, who were undergoing a project which was called Greater Enfield, which was drilling a whole bunch of new wells and then tying them into an existing facility. So I was already the production engineer for that facility. And then my new role was to go offshore and start up all of these wells. So I was offshore for a year on a rotation. So I was 3 on, 3 off. So it's 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. In the 3 weeks off, you can do whatever you want, which was a big plus for me.
Yeah.
But it was really cool because, I really liked being on site. It was sort of everything that you had learned from university, but also your experience in the office all came into play and then got real life experience where you're actually
Yeah.
seeing things, how it works, talking to people that are actually operating the equipment. And it really develops you as an engineer, I think. So I did that for a year. And then it was time for me to come back into the office. The offshore installation manager, so the OIM, was like, "Are you interested in staying offshore?" So I said, absolutely. So I went into a more operations role, which was a control room operator. So then you're actually operating the plant and equipment on a day to day basis. I did that for, I think it was about 2 years. And then I was offered the opportunity to go into the frontline superintendent role on the OCA FPSO.
Hmm.
So that's over here, they call it production supervisor, but you're essentially leading a team of inlets, mechanics, the engineers, that sort of thing, like chief engineers and things like that on the facility on a shift, which was really cool. So you get to like develop your leadership management style while also sort of staying that operational frontline basis, which was quite cool. Did that for about 2 years and then started talking to a few people I knew in the Houston office, and I've always been interested in living overseas. I think the States is a great place to live and work, and I've always wanted to travel over here and spend some time. So I got offered this role that I'm currently in, which is production analysis and improvement, and moved over in January this year. So here I am.
Yeah, very different, but in a good way.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what would like a typical day in your job look like now?
So at the moment, I'm working on, I would say, like four bigger projects. One of them is we're doing a complete procedure rewrite for the facility.
Hmm.
Another project at the moment is user acceptance testing for some surveillance software. Another one is looking at artificial intelligence use cases for the facility. Um, and another one is so minor tweaks on the facility. We've got issues with our produced water at the moment, so working on that
Hmm.
as well. So, sort of, I kind of like my role because I don't really have a typical day. I sort of have
It's always
priorities
changing.
that are, yeah, constantly shifting and moving.
Yeah.
But it's engaging with stakeholders, talking to the offshore team. Is there any new things that I need to be aware of? Is there anything that's causing you pain that I can help
Yeah.
with? Is there a quick fix, whether that's an AI agent that we can quickly develop with the AI team in house, or is there a software that we can use to make your life a bit easier? So it's a lot of talking to people. It's a
Yeah.
bit of an email job, interfacing with different people across the business and external providers as well. So yeah, it's kind of cool in that I don't really have a typical day, which is good for me because if I'm getting bored of something, I'll just switch to something else.
Yeah. That's
But
yeah.
yeah, it's meetings. It's also spending a bit of time doing reading online about what's available, what are the new softwares, what are other operators doing in this space. You know, is there something that we can leverage or learn from?
Mm.
Reading different papers from organizations like SPE to see, you know, is that a technology or a technique that we can use in house. So it's kind
Yeah.
of cool in that it gives me flexibility to be able to look at a broad range of things and then sort of focus in on what I think the value add topics are.
Yeah, for sure. So, you've talked a little bit about some projects that you've worked on. Have any in particular been memorable or rewarding for you?
Oh, good question. I think the one at the moment with the procedure rewrites,
Mhm.
it's a huge project. So we have 44 procedures on Shenzi, and they
Mhm.
detail every piece of equipment on the facility. And I'm quite passionate about it because I think procedures are very important, particularly if you've got a new person on board the facility
Yeah.
in a frontline role who's following a procedure. It's really important for that to be correct
Yeah.
and safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you want people to be able to pick up a procedure and be able to follow it easily with no issues.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, where the procedures were when I started was, oh,
Not good.
like we don't use those. They haven't been touched. They haven't
Yeah.
been touched in a while. So it was
Oh.
quite a big overhaul of the procedures to start with. But
Mm.
it's a hard slog, but we're getting there, and the procedures are looking really good and updated. You know, we've only done 5 of 44,
Yeah.
but you know, maybe by the end of the year we'll be in a better spot. But
Fingers crossed.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
But I mean, it's a good project to do because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Another thing that we're doing is looking at, which is quite cool. So it's a bit of a pet project. So as I think I mentioned before, we were having some produced water issues on
Yeah.
Shenzi. We've engaged an external company who uses physics-based models
Hmm.
and machine learning to predict failures on equipment. And
Wow.
so they're normally used like turbo machinery, so compressors or pumps and things like that. And they can predict when things are starting to go out of normal operating condition, flag it early, and then you would give alerts to say, hey, you need to have a look at this. We think it's this, and we think that this is what's going to happen if we don't catch this.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like their bread and butter is like the rotating equipment.
Mm.
What we're doing is we're sort of extending that for a proof of concept to the produced water system. So it's quite a large system, it's across the whole facility.
Mhm.
Um, and what we want them to do is we've given them like 18 months of data. We've basically said, you know, these are the time periods where we've had these issues. Um, can your software then go, okay, well, I think this is what's happening here, and this is what's caused it to go off spec here, and then use that now to tell us when we've got a problem or when we might see the water start to go off spec, which just means it's over 30 ppm of oil
Okay.
content, is essentially what
Yeah.
off spec means. So it's really cool. So we're kicking it off next week. They've got all the data. They've started building the models. So it'll be really cool if we can get some good feedback, particularly
Yeah.
in like the broader process space versus
Mhm.
the rotating equipment. You know, we know that they can do, and it's
Yeah.
incredibly useful. But if we can sort of prove this broader concept, that could also be applied to our water
Open so
injection.
many doors. Yeah.
Yeah, and like lots of other facilities could utilize this product. So
Mm.
I'm secretly very hopeful, but we'll see. I think it's quite cool. So yeah, we'll see. And
Yeah.
it's all in that sort of AI space with the machine learning. So
Mm.
it's great to see what all this technology can actually do and help in real life.
Yeah, for sure. So now kind of like going into the main kind of question, like have you ever had to face any challenges or biases due to being a woman in the engineering field, especially with being offshore? Like kind of how has that had a role to play in it, I guess?
Yeah, I think um, sort of in two different roles, probably. So, initially, when I was offshore as an engineer, I think you do face some challenges. I was young. I mean, I was, gosh, how long ago was that? I was probably 25
Hmm.
when I first went offshore. And I hadn't been offshore before, or I had, but it was for, a few days to a drill
Yeah,
rig or a few days to
not
a
like three
facility,
weeks. Yeah.
just visiting, like not for a long period and not
Mm-hmm.
really in a position where I'm telling people, I need you to
Mm-hmm.
do this, or asking people, can you do this? We're looking at that. So it was kind of a different, like, position to be in. And I think, you're working with people that have been on that facility for a long time and have a lot of experience. And so I think trying to engage with people while portraying that you do have the knowledge and that
Mm.
you're competent and capable, while also, getting them on side and getting them to work with you and
Yeah.
using their like knowledge as well. So it's a two-way street. I think
Yeah.
it was a learning curve. I think it was challenging at the first instance because I think sometimes, a lot of the older guys will sort of go, this, graduate
Yeah.
engineer is coming and telling us what to do, and we've been around forever.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of proving yourself at first.
Yeah.
So that was sort of a little bit challenging. But I think once you develop those relationships, you really do um, improve as an engineer, but also, you know, you improve the culture as well. So
Yeah.
I think when I first started, I was the only female offshore there. So,
Yeah.
but by the time I had left, there was quite a few, which was really good. And I think the more common it is and the more used to people like the more used to having multiple females offshore and
Yeah.
just that change in behavior, the change in conversation, I think as well. It really goes a long way. And I think like the culture on board really improved with having females on board, which was great. And then I think the other side of it was when I went into a leadership role
Yeah.
offshore. So again, I was quite young. Um, my team, I think the average age of my team was maybe 50.
Yeah.
I was late 20s, early 30s. And I got a few times I was mistaken for an apprentice.
Oh.
And like someone goes, oh, are you the new, like this was in my first like one or two swings. They're like, oh, are you one of the new apprentices offshore? Like, are you an inlec? And I was like, no, I'm frontline superintendent. And they're like,
Yeah.
obviously quite embarrassed. But I think it was
Mm.
just like, it's that initial assumption of, I see a young female offshore, I think, oh, they fit into the box of an apprentice and that's where they
Yeah.
have to be. So I was the only female on the leadership team on board.
Yeah.
Um, and, I think that comes with its challenges of just, being heard, being accepted. You don't want to walk into a room and everyone stops talking.
Yeah.
That's like the last thing you want. So I think like it really is just a matter of getting to know people, making them understand who I am, how I work,
Yeah.
what's important
You're
to
here for a
me.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And like setting boundaries too,
Mm.
these things where I don't care, we can have a chat about, but, don't discuss that in front of me because
Yeah.
you're living and you're working with people. So I think that's
Yeah.
the other part of being offshore is you're spending 3 weeks with people and it's 3 weeks straight. You're working with them for 12 hours a day. And
Mm.
at the gym, you're with them. Or if you're watching a
Yeah.
movie in the cinema, you're eating together. So it's essentially like living with,
Yeah.
you know, 80 other people for three
Yeah.
weeks. So you get to know people really well, which I liked.
Mm.
But yeah, I think, initially there was challenges, but I think again, it was the start of bringing a lot more females on board, which was great to
Yeah,
see. So, and
super important.
mostly in that apprentice capacity, because that's how we were sort of getting people,
Mm.
through and onboarded onto Woodside, and particularly in the
Yeah.
trades. Um, but yeah, I think you just see a real improvement in culture having females on board. Having
Mm.
multiple women on board is always a great thing. So I think I didn't face any like specific challenges, but I
Yeah.
think it's just sort of that perception initially of being the only woman in the room when you're having
Mm.
a conversation at a leadership level is challenging.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of like a zoom out now and like a final question. What advice would you give to young women who are considering pursuing engineering?
I think just say go for it. I
Yeah.
think it's a great career choice. Doing an engineering degree doesn't necessarily you'll mean you'll end up in just engineering. It opens a lot
Mm.
of doors. It teaches you a way of thinking and a way of processing information, which I think is so important in everyday life.
Yeah.
I think it's excuse me. I think having that engineering background just means you can move into multiple different uh, businesses, areas. You wouldn't be stuck in oil and gas if you didn't want to be. You wouldn't be stuck
Yeah.
as a petroleum engineer or a rotating or mechanical engineer. A lot of my friends from university went into consulting. Some of them are totally in data science now. In management, lots of different things. So I think it's a great starting point, and if you love engineering, it's great. But you can also do a lot with engineering. It's not a one-stop shop.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Make sure to keep updated for any new episodes.